Manager Murmis and I were a little slightly upset with this one because we told the company that we shouldn't pay it, but they told us that we should, and it turns out we shouldn't be paying a particular federal tariff on one of our bills. So they're looking to go back and actually get us a refund of those taxes that we've been paying for the last, was it year and a half, and then also have it removed from the bills going forward. They also feel that we could negotiate a better rate now with the changes in technology, that that rate was good 2 years ago, but now perhaps it's not the best rate, so we're going to be looking into getting a better rate going forward as well. And the electrical, the easier of the two is a lot of the city's streetlights, they feel are being charged the wrong tariff rate by ComEd. And by doing so, effectively, we're overpaying for the taxes and the tariffs on the streetlights. So we're going to look to get those adjusted down. There's also on one of the streetlight accounts, one of the franchise accounts, a very large refund, large credit of over $17,000. That due to the way that ComEd prepares the summary bills, it never actually gets shown on a bill. We actually found 2 or 3 of these ourselves when we went through the NIMEC process for the city to switch over the treatment plant and some of the other city facilities. We found a couple of these on our own recognizance, but this one, since it hasn't been converted over to another supplier yet, it's just been sitting with NICOR. I mean, aside from calling up and asking about every account on a regular basis, there's really no way that we would have just found this. Unless there was, like I said, a lot of calling and digging and prodding of information from ComEd. So all that being said, the agreement with AM Audit was whatever we accept of their findings, the potential savings, or on the utility tax side, the future earnings would be split 50-50 with them for 3 years. If we decide that these findings aren't really significant enough and we don't want to go with them, then we can continue on our current course, but the city itself we can't say, okay, thanks for the findings, and then call NICOR tomorrow and switch the providers, because we have to wait. There's a 3-year waiting window before the city could go and do that on our own. So it's not huge monies, but at the same time, you know, it's money that we shouldn't be paying, so staff feels that we should go ahead and, you know, save what money we can, especially in these times, and you know, approve these recommendations, and we'll work with AM Audit to get them implemented.
Let me see if I understand what you're saying. They're saying that they could save us out of telecommunications and gas a total of about $4,500, and the electric, they said they could save us about $17,500, but the city is unlikely to close its street accounts at any time soon, so this credit would continue to sit there for years or decades to come. So what is your recommendation then? Which way are you asking us to go?
The global recommendation would be to approve AM Audit's recommendation to switch from the third-party suppliers back to NICOR, which would be the approximately $3,900 a year for gas. Have them take the tariff off of our telecom bill and get us the refund for that. And then also at the same time attempt to negotiate a lower rate going forward, which we don't know what that rate is, so we don't have any numbers on that, unfortunately. And for the electric, attempt to switch the street lighting tariffs to save the city $1,683 approximately per year, and for them to get us that one-time refund of $17,000.
So you want to do all three?
Correct.
Okay, I'll put that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Questions?
The $17,468.92, that is our money, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and if we say no, that we don't want to do this, do we still get that $17,000 back? Or do we have to wait 3 years,
We would have to wait the 3 years.
even though it's our money? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you, well, go ahead.
Manager Murmas was...
I'm just wondering why we would have to wait if we decided not to do this, if it was, if it's our money.
Sure. That's the one unfortunate caveat to the contract is we didn't know that that money was sitting there, and they found it. And so by virtue of them finding the money, that puts it in that 3-year waiting period. The other monies that we did when we switched over from ComEd to Constellation or Exelon, the city itself found as a function of closing out the accounts with ComEd. But since we're not closing out their street lighting accounts anytime soon that I'm aware of, even though it's our money, because of the way it's buried on the summary bill, we didn't know it was there. So, I mean, in theory, since we're not closing out the street lighting accounts anytime soon, we could just wait the 3 years, 3.5 years, and then go get it then and get all 17 instead of having them get it for us and having to split the baby with them.
All right. Is there any interest being incurred?
I would highly doubt that ComEd's paying us anything.
Just curious.
No, this was just a contract that the council did approve, that if they found money they could save us, that we would split the difference. So that's why I'm recommending that we do go along with it and make the motion, approve the motion. Any other comments? Alderman Woods.
I would approve going after the money too, but that being said, my question is, how do we track all these things going forward? You know, it's kind of, I don't want to necessarily use the word alarming, but, you know, for a company to come in and audit us and look at our stuff, obviously they have some knowledge base maybe we don't have on staff. And some insight into some of that stuff, but what are we going to do going forward to keep track of all these things? There are a lot of little things like this in the village. You know, this isn't the only area, so that's my big question.
Go ahead, Mr. Manager.
Actually, I was going to comment on the whole process, and I actually don't find it alarming at all. I was actually going to commend Mr. Kramer, Mr. Wilson, and our IT manager, Nick Case, Mr. Case, for actually putting these companies' feet to the fire for the most part way ahead of time. And actually, when AM Audit usually does these reports, there's usually a lot more savings that is found. So it's kind of, you know, it's good news for us that we've got a good staff, a competent staff that's for the most part catching all these things. Would we have liked to have found $500,000? Well, maybe not, because then we're really not, you know, a watchdog and doing our job. So I was going to commend those three because specifically I know that they really concentrate on making sure that the council and the taxpayers aren't getting ripped off. So actually, I'm not alarmed at all. I think this was a good contract for the city. It's a couple $1,000s here, a couple $1,000s there. The reason why these individuals are able to find these monies and we are not, pretty simple. Look at your phone bill. I can't figure mine out, okay? And I'm willing to bet that most of you can't figure yours out either. These guys work for these companies, these utility companies. That's the business they came from. Their head guy previously worked for, what, Nicor? Okay. So if you can figure out these bills, good for you. But some of us can't over here. So I'm not alarmed at all.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To also follow up on your question, Alderman Woods, when they did the analysis to kind of prove these numbers out to us, and I'm looking at the Nicor one, the natural gas one, What they did, I'll just hold it up real quick, was they put together a chart of the accounts that were affected, and they put the NICOR rate and then our third-party supplier rate next to it to prove out the price variance. So in my world, before we pay them a dime, they're going to have to reproduce this sheet every month going forward to validate the rate variance and then what the savings are, which is kind of how I started. So it's volume based. So, you know, this in March of 2010 we used 435 therms of natural gas. Well, next year if we only use 300, obviously that savings is going to be less. So.
Now, is it us that determines what the difference is? Are you the one that will let them know how much we owe them? Or are they going to tell us?
They can try to tell us, but unless I get accurate documentation to verify it, I mean, it's going to be a collaborative process. I mean, they're not just going to say, oh, you owe us $3,000, and I'm just going to, pull out my blue
Okay.
pen and sign it, so.
Alderman Woods.
Yeah, let me just respond back to the city manager. I was in no way picking on staff. There's a lot of things that the city does at the staff level. My question is more administrative, operational. Are there things, changes that we can make? Are there things that we need to add, other things that we need to do that we're maybe not doing? And this is bringing it to light. And can those things carry over in different departments? It wasn't meant to pick on anybody or the job that they're doing. I think that you're all doing a good job. That being said, I think we could all do a little better too. Thanks.
Alderman Winger.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, on this agreement, let's say we don't want to negotiate the natural gas contracts, then do we have that right to say, okay, we're not going to do this, and then it never happens? I mean, like, it was not a priority for us at the moment, or by accepting this proposal, do we have to renegotiate a contract with another provider?
Mr. Wilson.
The one good thing about this contract was that if we agreed to this, they quarterback the process through, so they would contact NICOR and the two third-party providers and terminate those contracts for us and switch us back over to NICOR. The initial terms of those contracts have long since expired, so we're just on a month-to-month renewal, so there wouldn't be any termination fees on those to get out of them. And I guess the other thing is if we don't accept this, then in theory we're going to pay $4,000 a year more than we
Right.
really should.
Right,
So.
right. And they do all the legwork and the switch over, and it'll be the same or better service.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Oh, you're opposed?
No, I'm in favor, but
I'm opposed.
Okay, a motion does carry. Thank you for the work done with it. Next item is a report and recommendation on the results of the IMRF audit. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chairman. As per my memo, on September 14th, which was a Wednesday, IMRF came out all day and audited the city on, among other things, our IMRF filings, making sure that we were just rudimentarily taking out the employees' 4.5% and then paying the required percentage from the city. Just by way of background, we actually had to go back and prove out a month. We had to take all of our wages for a month and go through the calculations by hand outside of our payroll system and prove out the process for everybody. And they did find 5 issues. Of the 5, 4 really there's not there's no decisions or anything on it. They're pretty much ones we have to implement. So we're currently in the process of doing that right now on the staff level. In fact, I believe Ms. Jepson has all of them implemented already, except for the tail end of one. We just got a little bit of information on that one this afternoon, so we're going to go ahead with that one as well. The one that is going to require a decision is for the elected officials' eligibility into the IMRF program. A few years ago, the city changed its standard from 600 hours to 1,000 hours. And initially, we did that primarily well, for a couple of reasons. One, it was a higher threshold, so some of the permanent part-time people that were getting close to, because once you hit 600 hours, then you have to enroll in IMRF. So some of the permanent part-time, like some of the crossing guards, dial-a-ride drivers, were getting close. Some of the seasonals were going over that, and so we switched it to allow, full 6 months for the seasonals, and the permanent part-time people probably wouldn't get there because they don't work 4 hours a day. They'd work 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, whatever. But we also changed the elected officials' hours to 1,000 as well. In a function of the audit, they asked us if we had affidavits or logs from the elected officials saying that they worked 1,000 hours as an elected official a year. At that time, unfortunately, our answer to that question was no. And we asked them what could we do to satisfy that in the near term, in the next couple of weeks. And they said that the elected officials could either submit a log sheet of all their time or sign the IMRF Form 6.93, which was attached to the memo, which is an affidavit attesting to the fact that you worked 1,000 hours per year as an elected official. Going forward, they've seen a lot of entities dropping the IMRF eligibility for elected officials for two reasons. One, the 1,000-hour standard they found is becoming harder for elected officials to meet. And then with the Tier 2 being 10 years of vesting, in our situation, that would be 3 terms. And so they found that a lot of municipalities, for whatever reason, the elected officials don't get to that 3rd term, so they wouldn't vest anyways, and so they would just have to send them their money back. So a lot of municipalities are discontinuing the eligibility for IMRF on a prospective basis for the elected officials. So this two-part decision here is, do the elected officials have, or could they produce a log sheet for the 1,000 hours, or would you all be willing to sign the affidavit stating that you worked 1,000 hours? That's the immediate. And then going forward, do we still, as a city, want to offer it to the new elected officials? So all of you would be grandfathered in. You would be fine. You would stay in the plan if you were in the plan. Or if you wanted to come on later because you're in it elsewhere, you would be fine as well. Or with the Tier 2, the 3 terms and everything, just going forward, do we not even want to offer it to the elected officials going forward? So that's the more immediate for the audit purposes is the affidavit or the log sheet, but going forward is, do we want to still offer it going forward, or do we not want to offer it going forward?
If I may, as senior alderman with 15 years approximately, the last time I checked, I would receive, when I retire, $28 a month. So just so the public knows that we're not talking about the numbers that are being published in newspapers about school superintendents or county or anything else. We're talking a very small, it might buy dinner once a month for my wife and I. That would be it. I think as long as we can sign this form and don't have to come up with a, in quotes, list of everything we do, And as long as they're not going to come back to us and say, we don't believe you, I say just to keep the program as it is, the way it is. Mr. Manager, you have an objection to
Yeah,
that?
no, not really. I mean, just judging from our council meetings, we probably got 1,000 hours right there usually.
No, it's, hopefully it'll be shorter tonight. We have 2 missing, so. Anyway, I'm going to make a motion that we leave the program as it is. All sign the form and be done with it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Now, do I have any questions? Mr. Alderman Woods.
Mr. Wilson, when you were talking about the 600 hours and going to the 1,000, we did that because some of the people were, getting borderline or they would have to be in IMRF. I thought it was an option, no matter how many hours you worked. Am I incorrect?
No, the way if I heard the question correctly, yeah, the way the hours standards work is if you're currently, with the city right now and you work 999 hours, the city, A, has no obligation to enroll you in IMRF, and since you don't meet the requirements by the hours standard to be in, we technically couldn't put you in the plan, which is how, the seasonals can work 5 months and 3 weeks and not have to be in the plan. But once you get over that 1,000 hours, or previously the 600, then you could, if you wanted to, elect to be in the plan. Typically, the seasonals wouldn't do that, but some of the permanent part-timers could have elected to do so. And once you're enrolled in the plan, if we changed it from 600 to 1,000, well, you were already in under the 600-hour provision, and so you're grandfathered in. And we actually have one employee that qualified under the 600-hour provision, and they don't work 1,000 now, but since they were qualified under the 600, they're continuing to be in the plan. There's a grandfather provision from prior.
Mr. Mayor.
Brad, that's one portion. The motion that Alderman Shockey just made, that's for one portion. Still need another motion on the other one. You were talking about going forward, newly elected officials. Is that a separate motion, or?
Well, we'd
Or
have
would
to
that
check
motion-
with Alderman Shockey. I thought he said leave it the way it is, so I would interpret that
Okay.
to just
All right.
go forward.
I didn't
as-
hear that part, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole point is, Alderman Coles and I were speaking before the meeting, and he reminded me that, we take phone calls, we go out to people's property to find out the problems. John Kramer will sometimes ask us to help out a little bit and talk to the folks if they're not quite sure of what's going on. There's a lot of things that we're doing that if we did want to sit down and make a long list, which I don't, that it would come to at least 1,000 hours, believe it or not, with our strategy meetings, with IML meetings and anything else. So we do, I think, qualify for that. Alderman Coles, you were going to say something.
If you wanted to do it by log, you'd have to go to a truck driver's place, get a log book like the truck drivers do, and you sit down and here's Mr. Good. I was there for 2.5 hours, and you'd say such and such a date, and then you'd go down to the next line. And then at the end of the day, you'd sit down how many hours that you've gone to see everybody. Anytime you picked up a phone, and then you'd have to become like a lawyer. If you talk to him for 15 minutes, he charges you for an hour. So you'd have to charge the person an hour if you were there for 5 minutes. If I called the police department and his line was busy, that means another call, that's another hour because I couldn't get through. So, I mean, you figure it out. You sit down and try to, whatever you do is don't try to assemble how much you do, because sometimes, like myself, personally, on Sundays. I drive around the city of Wooddale every Sunday morning in every ward to see what's going on. And that's my time in the morning. I wanted to take him one time, but I couldn't get him up that early.
Now I go to church Sunday morning.
So that's what I do. And that's, takes sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. I'm all throughout, I'm all over the city. So, I mean, if you guys, I signed my thing and I turned it in already, so I'm not worried about it.
Mr. Mayor, and we'll take Alderman Woods.
Brad, so basically with the motion, when newly elected officials come in, they're gonna have to keep a log because they're gonna go under the new rules, is that it?
Mr. Wilson.
Well, the first part of it is when, because you don't have to elect to take IMRF.
Right.
Of the 4 new elected officials out of the election this time, only 1 of the 4 elected to be in IMRF. So the 3 that didn't elect wouldn't have to keep a log, wouldn't have to sign this form. They're not in IMRF, so this is pretty much immaterial to them. But going forward, I mean, as long as the elected officials would sign that sheet every year, that would suffice in that regard. So you either keep a log, a yearly log, or sign the affidavit once a year. So it's pretty much up to you how you want to track it, how you want to do it.
Alderman Woods?
And this is just the city of Wooddale wanting to do this because of the issues you were talking about with part-time labor and part-time employees hedging over 600 hours, correct?
We switched to the 1,000-hour standard, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4 years ago. So the 1,000 hours has been on the books for quite a while now.
And we just kind of let it go by the wayside and forgot about it until now?
Well, this is the first time, to my knowledge, that we've had an IMRF audit, and IMRF has brought this to our attention that we needed this. Heretofore, we weren't specifically aware of the need for this documentation for the elected officials. Had we been aware, we would have, had everybody doing this all along, but this is kind of a new thing to us, so.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wesley.
Brad, why, when policies change, you were mentioning about grandfathered in about 600 hours? Does that even, they're rehired every year as seasonal. So why isn't, they should go under the 1,000, not the 600, because they're rehired.
Correct, the seasonals do. That one particular employee has been, I don't know how long they've been with the city, but they're a permanent part-time employee. So they work, I think, 3 days every week.
Okay.
But no, you are correct. The seasonals, though, yeah, they reset every year when they get rehired.
Okay, one more question here. On this, this was put out by IMRF for a cleaning of their books too. I'm understanding that correct, right?
Correct. Just a little backstory. I think it was 2.5, 3 years ago, they just said, hey, maybe we should go take a look and make sure people are doing it right. They did 8 communities and found 6 weren't doing it right. The next year they did, I think, 30 and found that 27 weren't doing it right. And so every year they've expanded the program.
I have one more thing here. Is this the IMRF form or the hours? Could anything be FOIA?
You speaking about this particular form?
Not just this particular form, it says 1,000 hours. Could someone come in and say, well, none of us are Someone's not working 1,000 hours, or all of us aren't working 1,000 hours. I mean, is it FOIA information? I don't know.
I do not know if the submission of that form is FOIA-able or not. I can find that out.
My point is, are we gonna have, if someone does it, like, I mean, this is a class 3 felony if you sign the form and you can't show proof. I mean, I guess it's a legal question. I don't know if the city manager keeps track of our hours of our meetings and stuff, and who's that, or someone does. I don't know.
I mean, we probably have a pretty good handle on the meeting hours, but as Alderman Shockey and Coles were saying, it's, when you get a call from the resident, I mean, how do you, short of writing it down, I mean, how do you really quantify it? I mean, the form's kind of a self-policing thing,
Has Mr. Bond commented on this?
I can, I mean, we told him that we were having the IMRF audit, and so he's aware of the process, but we can certainly ask him about it. If you want him to comment on it next Thursday, we can certainly brief him on this with your concerns and have him give a response or an explanation.
Well, if you want to change the motion then to read as, for the next meeting, that Mr. Bond or our municipal lawyer take a look at this and make sure he's okay with it before we vote on it. Can we do that?
Of course.
Would the seconder agree? Yes. Okay, Alderman Woods?
That's some of the questions, I mean, or concerns I had. I mean, if you have a form that says, the easy thing is just to sign this form. If you have it, somewhere somebody's going to ask you to prove it up, even though it doesn't tell you you have to keep track of it. So essentially, you're asking us to keep track of it, because that would be the only way we'd be able to prove that we weren't lying when we signed the form. And since it does have the penalty on there, and that gets into potentially other labor issues and stuff, just a concern, and I think we covered it with Alderman Shockey asking the attorney to look at it and maybe giving us some advice on it. Thank you.
No other comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
So Brad, some of us who have been on the council for, because you said we changed this about 3 years ago, I remember that. Everybody who was here then is grandfathered in at 600 or it's 1,000, because, I'm looking at class 3 felony. I'm gonna start keeping a logbook. Because like Roy said, I mean, anybody can come up. So are we at the 600 threshold or the 1,000? And I know you said you signed this paper and, you're grandfathered in, but like Alderman Wesley said, somebody can come up. You better have something that shows what you did.
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, as part of the review with Attorney Bond, I'll also reach out to our contact at IMRF and verify. As we were talking about the grandfathering, that popped into my head too, that since a number of you have been on since before we changed the hour standard, perhaps it would only be 600 that would apply to you. So I'll verify that as well when I talk to Attorney Bond. I'll verify that with IMRF in conjunction with the review with Attorney Bond.
Alderman Coles?
You got to remember that it includes the mayor because he's elected, and it also includes the city clerk because she's elected, and
City treasurer.
And the treasurer. And so you have 3 other people that are up higher than the alderman or equal to the alderman that I signed it. I signed it because I figured I do my job. So, and I'm not taking a log, and I'm not going to sit down and try to figure out where I spend an hour here and an hour there. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you got to do that. That's the only reason it's being done is because of money situations in the retirement fund, which is disappearing, and that's all it amounts to.
Any other comments before we vote on this issue? Alderman Lazara.
Yeah, just comment, I would never sign this. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm new, and I would go under the 1,000 hours. I don't put in 1,000 hours. As far as I'm concerned, the $28 a month, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I would not put myself in a position for the $28 to have a felony charge against me. So I would say, as far as I'm concerned, I would opt out.
Alderman Wesley?
Alderman Lazar, you have 14 more years to put in before you get your $28 a month.
And do think about this, I tried to do the math very quickly here, but that's about 14 hours a week. So it's really not beyond what the scope of the things that the aldermen do. Mr. Wilson, yes.
Just to follow up to Alderman Lazara there, and I'll kind of tie it into what Alderman Wood said as well. You know, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, IMRF gave us the option of log sheets or this form. Certainly from an accountability standpoint, it would probably behoove you to have some sort of documentation when signing the form. If, you know, the downside, you know, is, and this was kind of where the hour standard comes in, is if you don't do the 1,000 hours, you don't have a log, you don't want to sign the affidavit, then the recommendation from IMRF would be that you're not in the pension plan anymore. Now, if all the time that you've put in, if you've been vested, I believe you would just drop out at that point and your time would be locked. If you're not vested, then you would get your contributions back, provided you fill out the proper forms.
I just advise all the aldermen to make sure that the mayor appoints them to at least 3 committees so that we have enough hours every month and salt and everything else that we can do. I call a vote on this. Everybody in favor, please say aye. Of the motion to put it on the side already. The motion to leave the program as it is, as described by Mr. Wilson. I called a vote on it already. Go ahead. One more comment and then we'll go.
Well, it's more to, I thought that you were, part of that motion was you're going to add that the city attorney was going to look at this.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay.
We already, the seconder agreed to it.
Okay, then I'm in.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Okay, the next one, property tax levy report, or no, that's just a discussion item. Mr. Wilson, we all read the memo. We understand what you're talking about. What does staff recommends? You do follow the practice of increasing the tax levy. That's your recommendation.
Correct.
You want to say anything else before we get to the alderman's comments?
Well, just a quick point. It's a discussion item because we're not actually approving the property tax levy tonight. This is to give staff direction for how to prepare the property tax levy next month, early December. This was requested to be put on the agenda for discussion amongst the tonight 7 of you to give me that direction. So,
Comments, Alderman Woods.
Brett, maybe you can verify this. My understanding, or something that I heard, was if we stay flat and don't levy the higher raise, that the rest of the consortium of taxing bodies will actually suck up that money that we don't within those calculations. So the city of Wooddale, their portion wouldn't go up. Let's say you paid $182 last year, you'll probably pay very similar to that this year, depending on the equalized assessed values. But the overall, let's say, pot of gold still gets divvied up, and that portion then leaves room for Park District, School District, and other districts to absorb what we didn't take up. Do you have any thought on that or knowledge of that, or have you heard that?
Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have not heard that. And just, you know, the way the PTEL, the property tax extension limitation law, gives us the power to levy 5% or CPI, which for this particular property tax year is 1.5%. And so that's as high as we can go is 1.5%. And working on presupposing that everybody else is going to increase 1.5%, that's all that they can get. So if we don't go for that piece of the pie, everybody else is still capped at that number. So it's not like we're, I don't know, selling our 1.5% and then they can each take 0.1% out of that or whatever. So I'm not readily familiar with that, and that doesn't specifically sound correct. I can verify that, but just based upon the way the rules of the tax cap are written, that doesn't particularly sound right.
Right, and the majority of what you said I agree with, but I know that in the complex calculations that they do to get to those numbers, it seems that that actually could come into play. I don't know this to be true. I just heard this from a couple other people that are fairly knowledgeable. I'm just looking for verification. So if you could find out, that would be nice information to know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Alderman Wesley.
Okay, what's the dollar amount for the levy?
The total amount or this particular amount we're talking
That
about?
particular amount?
The 1.5% based upon last year's final levy would be $40,867.
So everything that we levied for years ago would be gone, and then we would start levying from that point further, correct?
Well, we would pass the same $2.724 million levy, which was our final extension for last year. So if we pass that exact same levy this year, then when we started the levy next year, we would still be at that base number.
Right, so we would lose everything that we've gained already, pretty much.
Well, we would lose this $40,000.
$40,000.
Yeah, but the 2.7 million base, that wouldn't go anywhere. That would stay.
And every year, the police pension fund comes here and gives a presentation of the funds that they need. And it's our due diligence as elected officials to fund that pension. And if we don't levy for that, I guarantee you, that pension fund, they're gonna be right here suing this council. So, they're looking at their money too, so if we don't levy, there's other ways of saving money with giving back to the residents, but in this case, you gotta levy.
Mr. Wilson.
Correct, and just a quick note on that. The funding request from the police pension every year is, again, just due to the tax cap nature of the tax levy that we pass. The property tax levy that we pass for the police pension fund is always less than their actuarial funding request, and the city contributes through other revenue sources, sales tax, income tax, whichever one you want to say we use for that purpose, to fund up to their actuarial funding request. And so even though, based upon this scenario, we wouldn't be increasing that levy, we would still honor our past practice of funding their full request out of other revenue streams through the general fund.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please do.
On the $40,000, what's that it comes out to an average house?
I was just gonna say, it's probably $3, $4 a year. And I was going to ask also, what the percentage of the property tax does the city get again? You gave us that pie chart.
6%.
The city gets 6 and change percent.
6%.
6% of the property tax bill. I believe we send out about 4,800 water bills, so that means, and that does include irrigation meters, so there's probably, I don't know if we call it 4,500 different properties in town that would get a property tax bill. That would be, what is that, somewhere just a little bit less than, on average, $10 per property. I think 880 Manager Murmas just told me, and I think he's telling me $290 per person, just on a pure straight line methodology. Obviously, it's based upon the valuation, but just some pretty quick and dirty numbers.
And if I'm not mistaken, we have given out increases to employees, union employees, that we have to cover out of that budget and everything. So, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. We're saving an average household $2-3. In return, where Osco was, or the hotel, or these bigger properties, they're getting a bigger chunk. All we're doing is giving back to them. We're giving them more money back if we do this, because they're getting a bigger break. Because they got larger property. Their property could be $6 million or $10 million. So they're going to get a better break. They pay to the city too. So are we helping the residents, or are we helping big business?
Mr. Wilson?
And just to kind of follow up with what Alderman Wesley said, one of the things that I just want to point out that even if we pass a flat levy, that doesn't guarantee that the residents' property tax bill isn't going to go up from the city. Last week on the agenda we had the tax consortium. So if a lot of the commercial properties come through and lower their valuations, that dollar amount has to be absorbed somewhere. And so it's all going to shift around through the assessment process. So just, even just a flat levy, the city will see the same dollars, but that's not going to guarantee anybody anything on their actual property tax bill.
No, it's kind of interesting. We've got something good when we got our tax amount for this coming year, or for this year, and the evaluation of the property went down a fair amount, finally. But we still are going to need that money. The schools are still going to be asking for more money. Fire department, all park district, everything else. So the tax bill itself is going to raise a little bit, even though we're only asking for 1.5%. And our share is only a little over 7%. Does anybody have any other pertinent comments? Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'll be honest, I brought this up because I was at the DuPage County hearings a couple weeks ago, and basically they've levied the same taxes, no tax increase for the past 4 years. But you just brought something up really interesting. Okay, so this tax consortium, they're going to go in and petition to lower their taxes. So even if we hold the line at the $2.7 million, because it's 40,000, last year was 40,000, I think you said the number actually ended up being $8,000. I think we gave away 7,000 to just a handful of residents for extra discount on the water and garbage. So the problem is, now if you're telling me these guys are going to go in, they're going to petition to lower their taxes, even if we don't pass the levy, they're going to get, theirs are going to go down and the residents are going to go up? Did I hear that right?
Mr. Wilson?
Correct, because the city levies an amount, we're saying the city levies $2.7 million. And that gets spread around pro rata based on the assessed valuation of each property in town. So if the businesses go through and, say, oh, the building's been vacant for 5 years, I have the income's down, I need to lower the valuation, due to the hardship. And so if they lower one person's valuation and lower their tax bill, we're still asking for the same amount of money. Admittedly, it's going to get distributed through the other businesses as well and the other residents. But correct, I'll say unfortunately in that regard, since we levy the amount, we get the same amount regardless of what the spread in the valuations is.
Mr. Mayor?
Actually, we just got last weekend, we got the new assessed valuations. And I saw how much my property went down. So basically you're telling me no matter what, we're going to get raised. So if one little group of people can go in and complain, that'll impact everybody because what's the use of, it doesn't make any sense to even pass this. I might as well go complain like those guys do. Here's my evaluation you gave me, lower my taxes. I was just trying,
Yeah.
I knew it was only minimal $8 or $5, maybe $15 if you had one of the huge homes in town. But
We did have the tax assessor come in and speak to us as a council a year and a half ago. If the people would like, we can have them come back in again to explain what they do. But in the meantime, Alderman Wesley, and then I'll call the question.
Mr. Mayor, when I was with the fire department, people protest their taxes all the time, especially big businesses. They would come in and every single year, they sit there and argue about their taxes. And they have, that's what they have attorneys that go every year and they protest the taxes to get their taxes lower. Yeah, everyone loses. If we want to hit the residents and saving some money there, I mean, could we look at lowering the vehicle stickers a little? But then in return, we only give the seniors $1. But has to be something, there may be something else. But I don't believe in doing a tax levy this way to help doing the tax, not doing the levy.
We can always invite him back, let the people know, and we can have a protest right here in the council chambers and levy and lower everybody's evaluation. Okay, let's call the roll on this. Staff recommends we follow past practice of increasing the tax levy by 1.5%. Do I have a second on that? Yes?
we don't make the motion to do 1.5%, right? That's not the way,
Oh, you're right,
that's
that's
not the way
right.
it works.
Discussion.
Right,
Right,
this was discussion, that's
It's
all.
just,
the-
yeah, I
we
don't
talked-
need a motion tonight, just,
Okay,
We don't need a motion tonight.
no motion. I believe I have the
put this adds on to our
consensus.
1,000 hours. Okay. Items to be considered at future meetings. Fiscal year 2011 audit report in November, the revenue handbook in November, fiscal year 2011 MFT closeout in November, and water rate study in October. And I think you gave Alderman Wesley some kind of a breakout on, what was it? You mentioned to me that you gave him a breakout on, not water rates or something?
Not me, maybe you, Chief.
Oh, was it for Eugene, Wesley? Before the meeting, you mentioned you gave him, you made something up together for him, put something together for him. Whatever it was, I'd like all of us to get it.
Okay.
Remember? Okay.
Sure.
Any other items to be for the future? If not, I'll ask for adjournment of the Finance and Administrative Committee. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I got to take my time because I need to get my 1,000 hours in. Tonight. Let's take a 5-minute break. We will come back and make it an omnibus. All right.
You can combine all these amounts that have to be requested in one package, so folks look at it. That's what we just did. What? That's what we just did. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I call the Public Works Committee to order. Let the minute taker reflect that all the members are here and we have a quorum. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of September 22nd, 2011. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those nay? Motion carries. I want to lump these all together in one motion. The first one being number 4, report and recommendation, pay request, partial number 4 to Anchor Electric, not to exceed the amount of $60,030 for Wooddale standby power upgrade. Number 5, report and recommendation, pay request number 2, AM Coating Inc. in the not to exceed amount of $53,410.50 for Reservoir 3 and 4 repainting project. Number 6, report and recommendation, change order 1, pay requests in the not to exceed amount of $110,562.30 to A-Lamp Concrete Contractors, Inc. for Hemlock, Edgewood, and Ash water main replacement. Number 7, report and recommendation, contract award to R.J. O'Neill, Inc. in the not to exceed amount of $257,782 for the North Wastewater Treatment Plant Aeration System Energy Efficiency Improvements. Number 8, report and recommendation, contract award Argonne Electric Company, Inc. in a not to exceed amount of $357,000 for the South Wastewater Treatment Plant standby generator replacement. And number 9, report and recommendation, contract awards Strand Associates, Inc. in a not to exceed amount of $17,000 for the South Wastewater Treatment Plant standby generator replacement construction engineering. Number 10, report and recommendation, contract award Baxter and Woodman Consulting Engineers, Inc. in a not to exceed amount of $24,160 for Booster 4 electrical improvement design engineering services. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No
Motion
opposed.
carries. Item number 11, items to be considered at future meetings, brush pickup, parkway tree pruning options in December. Number 12, I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? What? Oh, dude, I already got my 1,000 hours in.
I have 2 brief things. First, if it would be okay with the council, over the next 2 meetings, I'll be bringing 2 new vehicles that the Public Works Department has completed prior to the meeting, and they'll be outside. The first will be truck unit 231, our new snow and ice vehicle. We'll have that outside with some staff on hand to answer some questions. The second one being vehicle 506, which is our new water service vehicle. That'll be at the next meeting, and that's the vehicle we use for water main breaks. We actually received that vehicle today. It was almost a year to the date from when the purchase order was signed last year, so a lot of work went into that vehicle by staff, and I think it's a very nice unit. Number two, if I can, I'm going to turn the mic over to City Engineer Al Steffen, and he's going to go through some of the, just a few brief updates on the low-interest loans for some funding that we had put in for and some news about that.
See, I get to end on a positive note. Earlier, we reported that we have submitted for the IEPA low-interest loan program. That is the state's program for that provides low-interest loans to the communities. We put in for 2 grants, one for the Irving Park water main of $6 million plus, and the other one for the Thorndale water main. Both projects have made the list, the short list, well, not necessarily short list, but they have moved along the process. We now have been requested to put together